Welcome to this breakout presented by Upwave. We appreciate their continued support of iConnect. I'd like to introduce Ken Archer, VP Product at Upwave, and Travis Hockersmith, VP Platforms at Vizio. We'd like this section to be interactive, so please submit your questions in the Q&A box. Our speakers will answer them at the end of the section. Ken and Travis, over to you.
Thank you, Clorox. This is Ken Archer with Upwave. Upwave is a brand analytics platform, and I am really excited to be talking with you today about the exciting opportunities with connected TV. Upwave has measured hundreds of connected TV campaigns and has some really interesting first ever research we're going to unveil in today's presentation. And then I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Travis at Vizio, who's going to talk about how to leverage these opportunities with connected TV. So first, we'll talk about what is connected TV. So it can be really confusing hearing about all of these acronyms that go around OTT, connected TV, CTV, online video. How are they different from each other? And the thing that you need to keep in mind is that connected TV is basically streaming content that shows up on a physical television set. Now that can happen in a couple different ways. It can happen through a smart TV. So that's where the TV is connecting directly to the internet. So that can be a smart TV from a company like Vizio, for example. Or it can be through a gaming console that connects to the internet and streams any type of video content onto a physical television. There's also other types of internet connected devices that can stream content onto a television, like a streaming stick, like an Amazon Fire Stick. So there's different ways you can stream content onto a television, but if you're streaming content not onto like a personal device, like a mobile app, for example, but a connected TV so that it's more of a living room experience, analogous to traditional linear TV, then it's connected TV. Now, unlike traditional linear TV, connected TV advertising can be targeted much more precisely with, in fact, the same precision as digital ads. Now, this sounds great, right? So why hasn't everyone been doing this forever? Well, the reason is because of reach. The concern has been that, does connected TV have anywhere near the reach and scale of linear TV? Well, that was a valid concern until the past year. The expanded reach of connected TV has really exploded over the past couple of years, but particularly over the past year, such that over 90% of US households now use a connected TV. So for the first time ever, advertisers can actually reach more households through connected TV than linear TV. So you really get the best of both worlds with connected TV between linear television and digital. With the benefit of linear is scale, right? And an immersive format. But the benefit of digital is more precise targeting. What we see across the campaigns that we measure at Upwave is that benefit of a more immersive format is real. In fact, what our studies show from our data science team is that the brand lift that you get from a campaign, brand lift is the lift in attitudes towards your brand, like awareness, consideration, favorability. The lift that you get from a campaign requires 7 ad exposures in digital, requires only 3 ad exposures in connected TV. And again, that's because of the more immersive format that you get with connected TV. Now, the benefit of targeting that you get from this being a digital format, there comes in different forms. So there's different types of targeting. Travis is going to go into this in more detail, but it's critical to understand the different forms of targeting. Whether it's there's private marketplaces, there's direct buys, just like in digital, but you can also incorporate data on device usage and content consumption from connected TV viewing in your targeting. And it's important to understand all of the different types of targeting, particularly because the impact of connected TV we talked about entirely relies upon accurate targeting. In fact, Upwave measurement shows that connected TV, on average, to be less accurate in its targeting than the rest of digital. Now, why would this be the case? There's, all of the different targeting options available in digital are available to connected TV. Well, connected TV is more about a living room experience, as we talked about earlier. And so the dynamics around targeting are different. And it's critical that you're working with a partner that understands this brave new world of connected TV and connected TV targeting if you're going to leverage all of these benefits of greater impact with precise targeting from connected TV. And so to give you a primer and orient you to what are the different types of targeting that are available in connected TV, what are the things you should avoid, and what are the things you should lean into for your brand to leverage the unique opportunities around CTV. I'm going to pass things over to Travis Hockersmith at Vizio.
Thanks, Ken. Great to be here today. Like Ken said, I'll bring you through some of kind of the best practices that we see at Vizio Ads as it pertains to taking advantage of data in the CTV ecosystem. So, tactic one, select capable partners. So in ad targeting, not all data is created equal, and the approach taken to ad targeting needs to be continuously monitored and optimized in order to drive intended results. Even targeting approaches that are intuitive, like say keyword matching, cannot be assumed to be effective unless proven through data and results. So some considerations to keep in mind when selecting these capable partners. One, what's the diversity of targeting data sources that they use? Are they constrained to a single data set and targeting approach? Or do they have a wide array of approaches and optimize towards whatever's working? Second, what's the hygiene behind their data sources? How is their data collected and verified? Is the data audited by a third party? Ideally, the audit's not just focused on the construction of the data, but the efficacy of the data once it's deployed. Again, is the data driving to your intended campaign results? So some examples of auditors in the space would be Upwave. They can audit whether a tactic is working through their measurement tech. Nielsen and Comscore do a lot of validation around demographics. There's many validation companies out there, but it's really important to make sure that your data is not only constructed properly, but that it's working and driving your intended results. So finally, how are these partners adapting to the changing digital landscape, especially around regulation? So we've heard much about the death of the cookie market. So how will your partners be affected when some of the legacy digital tech goes away that they've been historically reliant on? Do they have approaches that'll work in this cookieless world? And also from a regulatory standpoint, we've all heard the acronyms GDPR, CCPA. Understanding how data can and can't be used in these regulatory changes in market is critically important. So your partners really need to be on top of that. So tactic two, optimize the brand outcomes. So it's important to have a single source of truth for any campaign that's measurable and consistent to use as a KPI, so a key performance indicator. All tactics should be judged based on their ability to move the needle against this specific KPI. The KPI in our experience needs to be granular enough that it's something that can be directly influenced by a specific campaign tactic, but not so narrow that it doesn't correlate to a business outcome. So some examples of good and bad KPIs that we've seen and we continue to see every day are click-through rate and video completion rate are pretty good examples of KPIs that are not indicators of business outcomes. Whether someone clicks your ad or sits through your ad doesn't tell you much at all about whether or not the ad is driving the intended result. A really good indicator, a really good KPI could be something like a brand lift study to understand, for those who are exposed to your ad, did it drive the intended attitudinal change in the viewer? And then on the more behavioral side, we have a lot of advertisers who can monitor post-click behavior leading up to a purchase, even if they sell a product on the website. But we can tell based on the household that a TV's in what digital activity are happening on other screens in the household. And that can be a really good KPI to use for online activity. But what's really important to keep in mind is, where in the funnel are you trying to drive an outcome? Your KPI is going to be different depending on that. And optimize in a very thoughtful way. Don't chase false signals. We have seen over the course of time, a lot of advertisers chase false signals like click-through rate or video completion rate, and it doesn't drive their brand metrics. Optimize appropriately for the type of measurement you have instrumented. So tactic 3, understand your audience data. It's important to understand how your audience data approach scales, first and foremost, I'd say. We've seen a lot of different approaches in the market. Some seem very innovative and cool, but you have to balance that with what's practical and effective. And to be practical and effective for most brands, targeting approaches must reach a wide array of consumers across a wide array of touch points. Many targeting approaches sound very impressive, but lack the scale to make an impact for your brand. For example, we've seen some location-based targeting approaches that focus on a very, very narrow set of consumers. And while those approaches can be very innovative and they can be very impactful for a very small set of users, it's not reaching enough of your customer base to really drive the needle on business outcomes. Finally, constantly test and learn would be my advice. Only measure success against those well-informed KPIs, but set up lots of tests to understand what's working and what's not over time. And your partners in the CTV space should be able to help you instrument some of these tests. Tactic 4, monitor exposure frequency. So in the CTV environment, frequency is critically important. And it's long been the complaint, one of the complaints of the CTV environment, that frequency can be too high. We've all seen in streaming services probably the same ad over and over and over again. And that's obviously not great for your brand or your budget. And the reason that this happens, one of the many reasons, is that there's too many disparate content sources on a connected television that aren't coordinated. So for example, most CTVs still have a linear input. They also have a variety of apps. And if you have 3 exposures in app A, 5 exposures in app B, that's 8 exposures, but those apps aren't really coordinating exposures with each other. And that's not to mention what's happening in linear TV, where there might be additional exposure as well. But the great news in the CTV environment is there are now deterministic targeting and measurement approaches to managing frequency across publishers, apps, and content sources. This type of data we refer to as ACR, automatic content recognition. And what it does is it can measure what's happening at the glass level, independent of the source of the content. So if you see an ad in an app or on linear TV, ACR detects it. And what can you do with this? Well, you can identify the users who are underexposed and heavy up your media budget against them, while saving budget for those who are already being exposed on other inputs. So you can also extend the reach of a CTV campaign to a cross-device campaign, which will reach a viewer in different context across different devices, which also helps by reaching the consumer in different contexts and different devices. You're not going to wear them out on frequency quite as quick. And plus, there's the cross-device impact that typically shows up in the brand lift metrics. So, for example, you might see a Kingsford ad on a TV in a Vizio household, and then based on detection of that household and the other devices in that household, later you can run Kingsford ads against other tablets, mobile devices, computers within the household to get those different touch points. So finally, staying on the topic of ACR, leverage ACR for greater reach. A lot of what I just talked about is driven by ACR, which again is deterministic glass level input agnostic detection of ads and content. But this ACR data opens up a lot of tactics. Like, for example, we can deterministically create a pool of TVs that are cord cutters. They don't have a linear input at all. We know deterministically that there is no linear TV happening on this subset of TVs. You could heavy up your media spend towards those cord cutters in order to drive incremental reach above and beyond your linear TV schedule. You can also do things like competitive conquesting. So find a subset of TVs that are exposed to your competitors' ads or heavily exposed to your competitors' ads. We already talked about frequency management, which is a key component of ACR, and household extension, which allows you to spread those impressions across different devices and really combine a CTV buy with a multi-touch point type of buy. So ACR data is really one of the key components that helps CTV combine the promise of digital with the branding power of the big screen TV. You're still reaching a consumer in a lean back environment on the biggest TV or the biggest screen in the house. But with this type of data, you can really employ some very smart tactics to improve reach, improve brand metrics, reach consumers across multiple touch points, et cetera. So that said, I will kick it back to Ken, and we'll be around for questions here in a bit.
Thanks, Travis. It was a really great session. Looking forward to some great Q&A. So now we're going to move on to some Q&A. We've had some really interesting questions come in during the session. And let's go here to the list. And as we're answering these questions, if you have further questions, just submit them into Zoom, and we look forward to answering them. So the first is, how effective is CTV at growing unique reach? Travis, let me hand that over to you.
Yeah, the way that we look at it at Vizio is through the lens of our ACR data that I touched on. And we can do some really cool things from that perspective, because we can identify how many of our TVs have seen an ad versus not seen an ad. So deterministically come up with a percentage of TVs that would not have been reached otherwise. So we do analysis typically for advertisers, both before and after a campaign. Before a campaign, to identify things like how many of our TVs are unexposed, which again, we measure through ACR. And also for those exposed, at what frequency are they being exposed? We can also look at your competitors, how many of our TVs are exposed to competitive ads. And then post-campaign, we can do very similar analysis as well. But generally speaking, what we see is that there's three groups of TVs, basically. There's those who are exposed on linear, those who are exposed in the streaming environment, and then those who are exposed on both. So we look at we look at the impact within each of those three categories. And generally, we see that we can drive a fair amount of, depending on the brand, of increased reach across our footprint due to the fact that more and more time is being spent in streaming and customers are becoming less and less likely to be exposed on linear. But we can answer all these questions at the brand specific level deterministically.
That's right. Yeah, there's a misconception out there that TV is no longer an effective medium for brand building. And that's just false. TV has become more fragmented, but CTV now, as we were saying earlier, is used in over 90% of American households. So it's more a matter of having a media buy that manages reach well to ensure that you are reaching your target audience. All right, another question. I've seen articles about Ctv fraud. How much of a concern is that? It's an excellent question. There was a really good article in the last week from the Wall Street Journal about this. Our perspective is that with any form of fraud, whether it's traditional ad fraud or CTV fraud, one of the most critical tools to have in your toolbox is to make sure you're doing incremental ad effectiveness measurement with an outcome that's non-fraudable. So in traditional digital advertising, a great way to beat fraud would be to require incrementality studies against like form completion or an actual purchase. And because a bot cannot walk into a store, for example. Whereas traditional MTA, which is all sort of correlation, bots can defraud those measurement techniques. And then if it's a brand campaign, same thing. Make sure you're doing brand lift, which is all incremental, because when you're interviewing people who are exposed and not exposed to your ad, we're not going to be interviewing bots. And so that will hold media partners accountable to actually driving incremental lift, which you cannot do with fraud. Travis, what are your thoughts on CTV fraud?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I'll take a slightly different angle in terms of how to make sure that you're buying impressions that are not fraudulent. I'd say that the number one thing that you can do is do deals directly with the publishers where you want your ads to land, because the particular type of fraud that we see most often in the CTV landscape, because CPMs are higher in CTV than other digital mediums, is that there are fraudsters who are making a mobile or a desktop impression look like a CTV impression and programmatically representing it as one. And the publishers are not the beneficiaries of this fraud. It's the fraudster who's spoofing these impressions. So if you do deals directly with the publishers where you want your ads to land, even if you want to buy programmatically, you can get private marketplace deals set up and things like that. But deal directly with the publishers and platforms where you want your ads to land, and your prevalence of fraud will decline dramatically.
Yep. All right. Another question: what KPI would be appropriate if a brand lift study is not available? So, for example, if you have a smaller budget for a campaign, or without enough funding for the brand lift study, or funding for enough impressions for the brand lift. So a couple things. First, whenever we see a TV campaign that allegedly doesn't have enough budget for the brand lift study, the first place we look is how much of the budget is not going to work in media. Because generally a TV campaign is, given the intended outcome of a TV campaign, it's going to be large enough to support a brand lift study. So a lot of times we'll see, in those campaigns, actually what's going on is a lot of the budget is going towards non-working media. Just need more transparency around like how much of the budget is going towards third-party data, for example. But the second is, if a brand lift study is just not a possibility, we would say that the second most important thing is to look at targeting accuracy of the campaign, because that is the main thing that trips up CTV campaigns. It's already a very immersive living room experience. It's just naturally set up to drive lift in attitudes of awareness, consideration, favorability, brand association towards your brand. That the problem is just when it's not targeted well. And so But having good targeting verification on a CTV campaign, we haven't really talked about it in this presentation, but it's actually become something that's really challenging. So traditionally, kind of the currency for this is a product from Nielsen called Digital Ad Ratings, and DAR just doesn't really work on CTV. It only works with one CTV distributor, Roku, but it doesn't work with anything else. It doesn't work with Fire Stick. It doesn't work with game consoles. It doesn't work. And so there are other measurement companies. Upwave is one of them, but there's others, True Optic, that are offering solutions for targeting accuracy measurement across your CTV media plan to kind of fill in this gap. All right. Next question is, how can marketers get scale in CTV across the fragmented TV and CTV market? I'll pass that over to you, Travis.
Yeah, well, what we recommend is a strategy that we call direct to device. So there's a variety of platforms in the CTV space. Vizio's one, Roku's another, Amazon Fire's another, Samsung ads, LG ads. There's many. Basically, platforms that aggregate supply. And so on the ad-supported services that run on those platforms, the quickest way to aggregate an audience across all of those apps is going direct to device. So working with this finite set of device manufacturers can drive a lot of scale. And then there's also some very high volume CTV pubs that you want to probably work with directly, like Hulu. So if you take the top CTV pubs, do deals directly with them, and then go direct to device to aggregate the rest of the ad-supported supply, that seems to be the most efficient path in our experience.
That's excellent. That's excellent. All right. Next question is, what are best practices in evaluating CTV's ROI? So I can take a first stab at that. In our experience, people who are buying TV campaigns, whether it's linear, addressable, or connected TV, they're not buying the campaign so that people will turn off the TV and go to the store and buy something. That's not why you buy a Super Bowl ad, so people can turn off the TV in the middle of the game and go to the store. They're investing in TV because it's a brand building medium, and it will lift these upper and mid funnel attitudes, awareness, consideration, favorability, so that when the customer has the occasion to make a purchase, then you'll be in their consideration set. So for example, for Clorox, throughout all of its CPG product categories, there's a dynamic of competitive brand loyalty that's very real, but studies show that, in grocery store brand loyalty within a category, generally is like 6, 9, 12 months, depending on the category on average. And so that means that's the path to purchase. And so you're not going to see the full impact of a effective brand campaign that gets you into someone's consideration set for a product category until you've played out that full 6, 9, 12 months path to purchase. And so to really evaluate the effectiveness of a TV campaign, whether it's linear, addressable, or connected TV, you have to monitor those metrics, awareness, consideration, and knowing which of those attitudes, which of those brand KPIs is the priority, requires understanding where you are in the market. Do you have high awareness but not as high consideration, or is lifting awareness basically where you're going to get the most impact on the bottom line? All right, well, that is the end of time. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to any more questions. But thanks so much for joining our session. And we've really enjoyed talking about the opportunities and challenges in CTV with you. So thanks, Travis from Vizio, for taking the time to join us, and really enjoyed the discussion with our friends and partners at Clorox.
Thank you to our speakers, and thank you, Upwave. Now we're headed back to the main room for our afternoon keynotes. I'll see you there.